Welcome to today's analysis. For decades, we've basically been operating under this underlying assumption, this comforting thought, really, that the skies above the United States are an impenetrable fortress, just this invisible, unbreakable shield completely protecting the nation from any threats up above. But what if that fortress is just a carefully maintained illusion? Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're breaking down some highly explosive, extremely sobering data straight from the Pentagon that totally shatters this illusion and really exposes a terrifying gap between our perceived safety and the harsh reality of modern warfare.
I want you to really let these words sink in for a second. This is absolutely not from some alarmist blog or a theoretical what-if war game. This is a chilling, direct admission from a recent U.S. Senate hearing, and it was spoken by Mark Barkovez, the Pentagon's Assistant Secretary for Defense, completely helpless. When the exact people tasked with defending the sky literally admit that they have absolutely no answer for the latest generation of advanced weaponry, well, we have to pause and ask ourselves, how in the world did we get here? Which brings us to Section 1, the Golden Dome, dream or illusion, the Pentagon versus the president's vision. So, to understand this massive clash happening right now in Washington, and I mean a real clash between President Donald Trump's ambitious vision for this flawless, overarching shield and the Pentagon's hard, cold scientific data, we first have to look at what our systems can actually do today. The data shows that America's current defense infrastructure is actually quite adequate for smaller, more isolated threats. Think of, say, a limited strike from a nation like North Korea. But when we take that exact same system and try to place it on the modern battlefield against much larger, technologically advanced adversaries, it is completely inadequate. Honestly, it's like bringing a paper umbrella to a Category 5 hurricane. This leads us right into Section 2, the approaching hypersonic danger, the unstoppable monsters. And out there, that hurricane takes the form of hypersonic weapons. These things are essentially unstoppable monsters that travel at several times the speed of sound, totally maneuvering unpredictably through the atmosphere. The absolute most terrifying reality presented in the Pentagon's reports: we have no shield. There is zero interception technology currently existing in America's arsenal to stop them. If one goes up, nothing is catching it. Moving on to Section 3, billion-dollar costs and failure statistics. Astronomical costs, dismal results. Okay, so with threats rapidly multiplying, we have to shift our focus to the math of war, because just throwing money at the sky doesn't necessarily buy you a shield. Let's look at America's pride and joy for a second, the Ground-Based Mid-Course Defense, or GMD. Over the last 2 decades, they've run 21 tests. 12 were successful, 9 failed. You guys, that is a 57% success rate. If you're in school, a 57% is a failing grade. In a nuclear scenario, missing 2 out of 5 incoming targets is completely, utterly unacceptable. I mean, if 5 missiles are launched at major cities and you only intercept 3, the math of that failure is catastrophic. And here is where the financial reality bites even harder. The U.S. has already spent a jaw-dropping $400 billion on missile defense over the decades. Yet, according to a report from the American Physical Society, all of this massive historical investment hasn't even solved a surprisingly basic problem: decoys. Out on the battlefield, our modern sensors can still be super easily fooled by simple dummy missiles, so you could literally have a billion-dollar interceptor completely waste itself chasing an empty metal tube. Now, this financial reality gets way more extreme when we look at the future projections. $3.6 trillion. That is the staggering estimated cost of the proposed Golden Dome project. To put that completely astronomical number into perspective, that is more than the entire GDP of many developed nations, and it's just for one singular defense project. While it gets presented as this ultimate safety net, the reality is a lot of scientists and defense analysts view this number, and honestly the project itself, as a complete financial and scientific fantasy. Let's look at why in Section 4. Physics and the hard battle against time, a battle of seconds. Because you see, the ultimate barrier here isn't a lack of political will, and it isn't even the budget. It's the unforgiving, cold laws of physics. It's a literal ticking clock counting down the fate of millions. According to defense expert Jeff Hett, the physics of a hypersonic strike give you an impossibly tight window. Step 1, detect the threat. That alone takes about 75 seconds for the system to even process.
Step 2. React and intercept. Because of the insane, unbelievable speed of the incoming weapon, commanders are left with only 25 to 35 seconds. Just 25 to 35 seconds to make a decision and launch a countermeasure. Less than a minute to decide the fate of an entire city. The science says making this calculation flawlessly every single time is pretty much impossible.
And hey, what if we try to solve this by just putting the shield up in space? Well, the logistical nightmare of that is absolutely monumental. To make a space-based Golden Dome work, you'd need roughly 40,000 interceptors constantly orbiting the Earth. And every single one of them would need maintenance or replacement every 5 years. We aren't just talking about astronomical costs anymore. We are talking about actively turning Earth's orbit into a massive, hazardous junkyard. The technology is simply struggling to keep up with the sheer amount of money being thrown at it. Which brings us to Section 5. Is it just a scare tactic? The psychology of deterrence. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the whole idea of the dome might not be about perfect physical shielding at all. What if we are looking at this entirely the wrong way? Defense expert Kari Bingen offers this incredibly fascinating counter-perspective. What if the Golden Dome isn't actually about building a perfect, leak-proof physical shield? What if the real battlefield is entirely inside the adversary's mind? This brings us to the concept of strategic deterrence. Bingen argues that even if a defense system is terribly flawed, simply having it changes the enemy's calculus. It instills fear. If an enemy knows their attack even might fail, well, they have to build more missiles, spend vastly more money, and really think twice before launching. In modern strategic warfare, forcing your adversary into economic strain, even if your multi-billion-dollar system only reduces damage by 10%, is still considered a massive strategic victory. It's a remarkably high-stakes psychological game. Yet, this psychological victory faces a very modern and a very, very cheap threat. Look at the stark contrast we're dealing with here. On one side, we have America's multi-billion-dollar shields. On the other side, the brutal irony of modern conflict, cheap drone swarms. As we've seen from recent global conflicts and tactics heavily used by nations like Iran, swarms of incredibly cheap drones and low-tech missiles can just easily overwhelm and exhaust an astronomically expensive defense system. You fire a $2 million interceptor at a $2,000 drone. Financially, the shield just bleeds to death. Which really leaves us with this final provocative thought. When the cold laws of math and physics favor the attacker, when cheap drone swarms can easily overwhelm trillion-dollar shields, and when hypersonic speeds entirely erase the human ability to even react in time, is superpower America actually living in a glass house? Will this Golden Dome ever be more than just a golden illusion? It's a profound, chilling question about the very limits of money and power in our modern age, and it's for sure one that defense experts are going to be wrestling with for decades to come. Thanks for exploring this complex reality with me on today's analysis. Keep questioning what's above you.